speaking.
Morning.
Right, we will have a difficult job in doing introductions, but this is Ivan Old speaking, the chair of the LSCSP.
Oh, I think...
So I'm going to ask each person from the list that I've got just to introduce themselves, starting with Chris Thomas.
I don't think I've got any volume. I'm not hearing anybody. Sorry, Ivan, I know you're speaking. I don't know. Oh, hello, good morning.
Hello, I can hear you, but you clearly can't hear us.
Can you mute her?
Ewan?
I'm here, yeah. Sorry, we're just muting Raj Singh for the moment.
The first name on my list is Chris Thomas,
Yeah.
to introduce.
Yeah, we need to check if Chris Thomas is there. Okay, try another name on the list.
Daniel Potter?
Oh, she's here.
Yeah, this is the introduction. We need to know who. I know that she's the business support
I'll read out the list.
Okay, you read out the list.
Yeah. Councillor Les Phillimore, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm dialed in. Thank you, Chair. Ewan.
Hello, Les.
Deborah Taylor?
I'm here, Chair.
Andrew Woodman?
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Andrew.
Councillor Michael Mullaney? Doesn't sound like Councillor Mullaney's here. Councillor Simon Wellband, are you here? Adam Slanecki, Leicestershire Police?
Can anyone hear me?
Peter Flynn, are you on the line?
Yes, good morning. Hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear.
You are indeed, Peter.
Thank you. Rachel Garton from the CCGs, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Mr. Ted Parton, County Councillor, on behalf of the Combined Fire Authority.
Good morning, everybody.
Andy Galway, Fire and Rescue Service.
Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Joshna Mavji, Public Health.
Yep, I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
Rick Bowsra, Leicestershire County Council.
Yes, Chair, I'm here. Good morning.
Chris Hedworth, Leicestershire County Council. Gurjit Samurai, OPCC.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
Julie Robinson from Charnwood.
Good morning, Chair. I'm here.
John Richardson.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Chris Brown. Doesn't sound like we've got Chris Brown. Sharon Stacey from Hinckley and Bosworth.
This is Rachel Birch. I'm standing in for Sharon Stacey this morning.
Thank you. Andrew Cotton from Melton Borough Council.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. I'm present.
Thomas Day from Harborough.
Morning, Chair. I'm here.
Raj Singh from the Ministry of Justice. I've seen you on the line. Are you there?
She might be rebooting her laptop so that she can hear everyone. So she might be joining in a second.
Is that Sabrina talking?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Morning. Hi, everyone.
And is Nick Dan there as well?
He should be. Let me just check and see if he's having any problems. Bear with me.
Should we just try Chris Thomas one more time? Are you on the line, Chris? Oh, okay. Chairman, would you like me to do the apologies as well?
Yes, please, Ewan, if you will give the apologies.
I've had apologies from Councillor Kevin Lloydell, who represents Oby and Wigston, and Councillor Lloydell would also like to pass on his thanks to Mr. Old for the way you've chaired the LSCSB over the last couple of years. Victoria Charlton from the OPCC, Mark Smith from Oby and Wigston Borough Council, Bob Byrne from the Community Rehabilitation Company, Grace Strong from the Violence Reduction Network. I think that's everything. Are there any more apologies?
Can I also, sorry, this is Sabrina again, can I also introduce Rita Patel-Miller, who should be online, who is our social value manager for the new prison development at Glen Parva, who I invited to this meeting.
Hello, yes, I'm here. I'm here, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Also, through you, Chair, could we record apologies for Lord Willie Buck, the PCC, and Paul Heinsohn, CEO of the Police and Crime Commissioner?
Yep, thank you. Any more apologies? Right, well, before we go into the full agenda for the meeting, two things that I need to tell you all. First is that Michael Rickman, who was our Vice Chair from Hmrc, is no longer in that position, and we welcome the new member from Hmrc. But it does mean that because of a complication for me personally, all of the voting members of the panel are going to need at some stage between now and 20 to 11 to elect a new Vice Chair. You might think, well, what does 20 to 11 have to do with me? I'm afraid it's yours truly who's the problem. I have been directed to go and have a blood test, and these days you don't seem to get much choice about when the appointments take place. So I will have to leave the meeting temporarily at 20 to 11, and we will need to have a new Vice Chair appointed to take over from me by that point in time. So Ewan, I think that as we go through, we'll have to look for guidance from you as to which point on the agenda you wish to bring that in as an additional agenda item.
Okay, we'll try and get it slightly before 20 to 11 then.
Okay. So can I check that you've all had minutes of the previous meeting?
Yes, Chair.
Correct.
Good. Are there any issues with the accuracy of the minutes? Silence is wonderful. Are there any matters arising from the minutes not dealt with elsewhere on the agenda? This is going far too well.
Well, Mr. Old?
Yes, Mr. Parton.
Obviously, for various reasons, I wasn't on the committee in December, but I note from one of the actions that it was hoped that something would be put in the Leicestershire matters regarding vehicle crime, but it was stated that there wasn't enough room in the Leicestershire matters. I was quite disappointed.
Yeah, I think the point Mr. Parton's raising is going to be covered under the action log when Rick goes through the action log.
Yeah, that was what I was going to be moving on to. Ted, are you okay just to wait till we go on to the action log?
That's no problem. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll bring you back in then. So we're moving then on to the action log, which is item 4 on the agenda, whose print is so small it's challenging me. Ewan, do you want to take us through this, please?
I think Rick Basra is going to take us through it.
Yeah, I can take you through, Chair.
Thanks, Rick.
Right, there's 3 items on the action log. The first one, as the Council just mentioned, the Leicestershire Matters article. Just as a reminder, this was as a result of some issues with car thefts, keyless car thefts, where individuals were using scanners to obtain key codes and then steal vehicles. There was a request made for an article to go into Leicestershire Matters. There's an article actually been created and is with the media team to put into the publication, Unfortunately, it missed the last publication due to actual room in the article in the publication, because as you'd imagine, it was heavily COVID-19 related. I am in liaison with Steve Pumphrey in media relations, and we're hoping to do something in the near future. In the interim, there are some social media messages that will be going out in lieu of that. I'll stop there. There's obviously going to be a question from the councillor in relation to that.
Ted, do you want to make any comment?
In terms of the what I would say is, I think what we need to do as a committee is to make sure that when we want to send a communication, that we try and prioritise it. People's security and feeling of security is paramount, and that's something that we can really deliver through something like Leicestershire Matters. And as regards social media, is there any reason why we haven't been able to do it already, rather than planning to put something on social media?
Rick?
Yeah, of course, social media messages, districts can send out their own localised social media messages. There isn't any other reason other than I've given it to the social media, the media department to actually do that. I can actually find out from them when they've done that in the past and report back.
Yeah, I think that would be a good way forward. Are you happy with that, Ted?
Well, merely to say for clarification for the minutes, that it would be my recommendation that we, as much as possible, we always look at when we're seeking to highlight something, that we try and prioritise it. It's totally understood that the pandemic took a huge priority, but we should always seek to prioritise. And in regard to social media, it doesn't take long to push it through as quickly as possible, because of course criminals don't wait.
No, I agree. There are, however, quite a number of people who don't use social media at all, whereas Leicestershire Matters is delivered to every household in the county. There's no reason why we can't have a twofold approach, one through social media in the short term and one in the next edition of Leicestershire Matters in the longer term. So if Rick could look at talking with Steve about the possibility of something going out over social media as an interim measure, and then we get it in Leicestershire Matters for the next edition, would that suit the argument that you're putting forward, Ted?
Certainly, and also to add to that, maybe we as a committee we could look to always find a topic to include in the preceding Leicestershire Matters, so we've got a constant stream of communication regarding the issue of the day.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Rick, carry on, please.
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
Actually, I'm on the PPS, so it's my first bill committee. So I discovered, after I'd stood up twice, that actually the PPS isn't allowed to speak.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, right, sorry about that. I just got a bit of interference on the line. The next item was in relation to national MARAC figures, and again, as a reminder to the board, this was in relation to the repeat MARACs, and a request that, as a comparator, that we have regional and most similar force group figures in the data set that we utilise. I can say that we now have that data on the performance portal. It's free for everyone to look at any point. There is also a link that I've put into the action log, which gives access to the Safe Lives data in relation to repeat MARACs across the country. I would have to say that that data is only produced annually, and also that, as a caveat, that the data, actually making direct comparisons between different MARACs is problematic, basically because they're all set up differently. So I would be a bit careful about looking at that data and comparing to Leicestershire. We were, and board members will note that there's a paper on the board papers in relation to Hmrc, and the purpose of that paper was to give some reassurance to the board in relation to the processes that are set up locally to ensure that repeat Hmrcs are dealt with appropriately. The issue there is that in Leicestershire, the repeat Hmrc rate has risen past the safe lives threshold, and unfortunately the manager of the Hmrc is unable to make it today. I'll ensure that he comes along to the next board to give that reassurance to the board that the processes in Leicestershire are appropriate. Happy to take any questions on that action.
I haven't got any questions listed in the conversation column, and I would ask all members of the board, if you want to ask a question, because I've only got 2 pictures on the screen in front of me, if you can put your question in the conversation column, that's on the bottom left hand side of your screen, like a little circle with a box in it. There 1 or 2 people have put comments in there, but if you've got questions, could you please indicate? And I've got Ted who's put down that he wants to ask a question.
Chairman, it's Les Fillmore. I need to come back, please.
Oh, right, so come back, Les.
I'm trying to get in. Sorry, members, I'm dialed in, so it's hard to get the point over. Can I just go back to the point about Leicestershire matters, please, Chair?
Yeah.
And a little bit of extra clarity, because this was actually my suggestion, and it will help Ted, I think. It was to use a form of communication that we know goes through every single residential letterbox in the county, which is what you mentioned, Chair.
I did,
but
yes.
It was always about what's the current hot topic. So actually, if members recall, this actually started as an idea when we were discussing children riding electric scooters on the pavements, which is illegal. But Mummy and Daddy are paying 400 quid for those scooters. So I think, Ted, you know, the intention is exactly what you've highlighted, but it is about a hot topic that goes through every single residential letterbox. And that means that everybody who is digitally excluded or not on Facebook or following this, that and the other will see it, that there is a hot topic that they need to know about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Les. Ted?
Right, I printed off these Hmrc forms. And given that the gentleman's just explained there is a caveat that data is recorded and collected, assimilated differently to in between forces, then it pretty much answers the question. But I was thinking reputationally, certainly in case the media were to look at this data, that obviously yes, the percentage of repeat figures is higher in Leicestershire. One other figure that is unfortunately quite pertinent at the moment is the demographics of victims. Proportion of cases with black and minority ethnic BME victims, Leicestershire is slightly higher than the England average. Now obviously again the gentleman has just explained that there are reasons for that, but I'm thinking certainly that message that he's explained does need to be got through, especially if the media were to suddenly delve into these figures, and also for the person that does assimilate these Hmrc figures, they really ought to spell England correctly before the media start looking at things like minutiae. Thank you.
Okay. Right.
Chairman, it's Les Fillmore. Could I have a question on the Hmrc, please?
Yeah. Go on, Les.
Thank you, Chair. And I understand the caveats. I think Rick was talking through it. What I am concerned about is, I think what Ted's just raised, you know, what we are reporting is a 47% repeat offender or a repeat contact. That's either correct or it's not correct. And it's, you know, ignore any other regions and areas. If that is a correct figure for Leicestershire, that would be quite concerning to me, that we have a 47% repeat offender. So I'd be interested to understand as to what we're actually going to do about that, because it's not relevant to any other region. I'm interested in Leicestershire.
Can I speak, Chair?
Yes, of course, Rick.
Right. Okay. One of the big changes that has occurred recently, relatively recently, is the change in definition for repeat. A repeat previously was any person that was involved in a repeat incident involving violence or threat of violence. It's now any further contact from that person, subject to a number of other caveats as well, which I won't go into now. But what that means is that the threshold for actually becoming a repeat Hmrc has increased. However, that hasn't been repeated nationwide. The definition of it has been quite strictly adhered to in Leicestershire. We can't say the same for others, which is where the problems arise in comparing. What I had arranged was for the Hmrc manager to actually come along to give that reassurance, and obviously that will happen at the next board. But we're not necessarily just looking at repeats as simply a repeat compared to how repeats occurred previously. It's a new set of definitions that we're working to.
Chair, can I come back on that, please?
Yeah, come back.
So I think, Rick, I understand what you're saying, and we eternally keep changing the way that we report things. But the fact of life is, if we are doing it absolutely to the letter, we have a 47% reoffending rate or a recontact rate, repeat cases. So that is quite clearly virtually half the people that are involved are constantly going through that revolving door. So may I request through the chair and through the board that actually we have some form of written response and explanation as to why this is, and indeed what the plans going forward are to address it. Please, Chair.
I think, Les, my advice to you would be, as we've got the head of Hmrc coming to the next board meeting, you might be better to put that question directly. You'll get we can get you a written response if you still wish for one, and other board members support you. But the fact that you've got the head of Hmrc coming to the next board meeting, where it will be quite clearly an item on the agenda, I think probably ought to give you some satisfaction. I totally agree with you. 47% sounds horrendous to me, far too high. But equally, I'd like to know more about what the targets are and over what time period. I won't be there to ask those questions, but you will be.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, Rick, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, continuing on to the final item on the action log. This was in relation to Op Lionheart. You'll recall that there was an input from Shane O'Neill and Julie Robinson in relation to Op Lionheart on Charnwood District. And there was a question asked by Chris Brown in relation to essentially the lessons learnt and the processes that there were to learn the lessons from that actual operation. And I was conversing with Shane O'Neill. He's unavailable today, but I'll arrange for him to come along to a future board to actually give that input.
Yeah, I think from a board perspective, Chris's questions were very good, very searching and need answering. So I'm sure board members will find the explanation that comes from Shane that will be able to do that. Okay, anybody else anything to say on this? One of the problems that I've got as your chair today is that people who are on the telephone, it doesn't indicate in the comment column on my Skype screen. So you will have to be interruptive if you want to say something, and I'm not able to call you because I just haven't got an indication, in fact, that that's required. Right, we move on then to the next item on the agenda. Who's taking that, Ewan?
Well, I believe it was Raj Singh, but she's been having some technical problems. So I don't know whether Sabrina's on the line and can perhaps take over.
I am here now, Ewan.
Are you here, Raj?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to take us through it then?
Yeah, I can hear you, Raj.
Thank you,
Chair,
Ivan.
we've missed item 5.
And just to start by saying, obviously, apologies. Technology is a wonderful thing when it works. So please do forgive me. What I'd like to do is perhaps...
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, we've missed item 5 and it's quite important.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Actually, on my agenda, Deborah, I haven't got an item 5. It goes agenda 2, 4, 6.
Put item 5, declarations of interest.
Thank you. Have we got any declarations of interest? Right, we move on to item 6 then. The new prison Glen Parva.
Thank you. What I'd first like to say is thank you for allowing us to do your meeting. I like pressing off the phone, so please do let me know if you have through me. What I'd like to do is to share my screen. Can everybody see the screen?
No.
No, I'm dialed in.
Right. Okay, Sabrina, would you like to see if you can share your screen?
Yeah, I've tried to, but it's not allowing me on this function. It might be because some people are on the phone. So
right.
We'll just do it verbally, Raj, and I can send it round to anyone after the meeting.
This is a wonderful day. Yes, that's marvellous. Thank you, Sabrina. So just to introduce myself, my name is Raj Singh. I am leading on the construction of the new prison at Glen Parva. We've got a 15-minute slot today, which obviously is not very long, and we want to give you time for questions, so I'm just really going to race through the presentation. But just to also introduce who else I've got on the phone, I have Nick Dan, who is head of mobilisation. So this is about getting the prison up and running. So a really key job there. We have Sabrina Zeller, who is head of our stakeholder management. She's the lead, so you will probably see her on many of the meetings. And we've also got, not that they're very important roles, but we've also got Rita Patel-Miller with us today, who's our social value manager. Some of you may have met Rita already, but you probably will do in the near future, because her role is going to be quite front-facing, and she'll be working with a great many of you, I'm sure. So what we've got is, those of you who are already aware, we are on site, so we are there already, and just to start by giving you a little bit of progress so far. So in November, as you know, we were working with some of the design changes, having demolished the prison, the old prison, in May 2019. So in November, we were able to submit some reserved matters to do with a redesign. And then in May 20, those were actually approved. Now, some of those reserved matters involved quite a bit of liaison with a great many of you, because you had concerns, particularly over the house block and its relation to Westview Road. There were issues such as noise, etc., and we worked with Alberto Costa. Our prison minister was also involved to try and allay the fears of the constituents, to make sure that all of their issues, etc., had been addressed. So they've all now been incorporated into the design, so you'll be pleased to know that that has happened. There are conditions, there are quite a few conditions ongoing, and we are working those into the actual programme itself, and we'll be liaising with the relevant council as and when we need to. So that is ongoing. We are also aware recently of some queries regarding the fencing, so we are undertaking quite a few intrusive fence surveys to actually look at the state of the fence to again make sure that the residents feel that any queries that they're raising are actually addressed properly. In May, we actually began what we call advanced work. Now, this is really work that is to try and help prepare for the main contract itself. A lot of it is groundwork, so you will have seen that we've actually got diggers on site, we've got some cranes on site, and what we are trying to do is to really prepare the ground, so utilities, gas, electric, etc., and drainage. But also asbestos. There was quite a lot of asbestos found on the ground, so that ongoing, and that work will continue really right through now, with the main contract hopefully due to start July, end of July time. We haven't yet announced who will be the main contractor, and that will happen in the very near future as we move on to the milestones themselves. In terms of, sorry, just lost you there. I had some pictures which obviously I'm unable to show you, but we will circulate those, as Sabrina said. I'm sure that one of the considerations you might have at the moment is how have you managed to achieve this through the coronavirus crisis? I'd have to say with great difficulty, but Glen Parva was actually allocated as a priority project by the government, and what we were able to do was to issue the staff with key worker letters, etc. And obviously by liaising with the supply chain, we were able to facilitate getting them leased on site. So that's how they were able to begin work so quickly. And then our up and coming milestones, we very shortly will be announcing the main contractor for the construction work itself, which is due to start in the summer. So whilst we will feel it's summer now with the temperatures just recently, we're probably looking at the next few weeks. Maybe Sabrina can give us more detail on that in a moment. We will then be launching the competition for the actual operator of the prison, and that's going to happen around 2021. In spring 23, we are expecting to complete the construction with a view that in summer of 23, the first prisoners will be being received. So that is quite it's a tight program. We are trying to move as quickly as we can, but obviously observing all of the neighbours' thoughts, etc. And what we do want to do, as I said, is to make sure that we include all of you within the journey along the way, and obviously this is where RITA will play quite an important part. So I don't know if there's any questions immediately, or whether you'd like to hear from Rita perhaps in terms of her role.
Let's say I've got a question, Chair.
Deborah, got you down as a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to when you expect the build to be completed in the new prisoner, will the whole site be completed before the first prisoner has been received, or will there be ongoing building work when prisoners are there?
Our intention is to complete the prison, yes.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
Let's say more, please, Chair.
Yes, Les.
Thank you. Good morning. Just curious, and hats off and thank you very much for the intention to support the SME community. Just curious, are you just running that? I suppose the question is, how are you looking to engage and attract those SMEs? Is it just through the normal public procurement system where you're going to advertise it and they have to respond, or you're doing different advertising? Because I'm just looking here, you know, you're talking about 25-mile radius.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious as to, and just for clarity, I'm a representative of the Federation of Small Businesses as well as being the council. So I'm just curious how you're going to get that noise out there and attract those SME businesses, please.
Well, that sounds like a perfect question for Rita.
Hello, good morning. So yes, I think what we've done is we have set up, or I've met with some local stakeholders towards the end of last year. So the plan was that we would be holding some Meet the Buyer events locally, so that we could promote the opportunities for tendering for some of the work packages. So because of COVID, we were unable to attend that first of those Meet the Buyers, which was going to be held at the football ground through Leicester City Council. So yeah, the plan is very much to carry on doing that engagement. We're planning to have a first steering group meeting for people and skills on the 21st of July, to which all the three councils have been invited. So that would be Blaby, Oadby and Wixton and Leicester, so that we can actually discuss with you the best ways that we can get the messages out there. I know in other areas we were able to use like local kind of government, so local government portals where we could also, make sure we're promoting those opportunities locally. So it is having those conversations with yourselves. I did previously ask that question, and I think that the discussion was that they were looking into seeing what they could do about having more local sort of advertisements and promotion of opportunities, but definitely it is with working with organisations like yourselves to help us to make sure that we are making the opportunities as accessible as possible.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. May I suggest then, if protocol permits, if I can help get that noise out into both federations, sport business, and probably the chambers as well for that matter. Ewan's got my contact details. By all means, if I can help, just let me know.
That'd be fantastic. Thanks very much. I look forward to receiving your contact details.
Okay, that can be done, Ewan?
Yeah, I'll pass on the details.
Any more questions? Right, so before we go on to the next item, I'm going to ask Ewan to take over. You now need to elect a vice chair to take over from me while I go for this blood test. I will rejoin when I come back from that, but that probably will take about 40 minutes. So Ewan, it's over to you.
Thank you. So we now need to elect somebody to chair for the rest of the meeting today. Do I have any nominations for chair?
Can I nominate Deborah Taylor if she's up for it, please?
Thank you. That's one nomination for Deborah Taylor. Do we have a second for Deborah Taylor?
I'll second Deborah Taylor, Ewan.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations? Okay, so is everybody in favour of Deborah Taylor chairing for the rest of the meeting?
Yes.
I'll take that as a yes. Deborah Taylor, it's over to you to chair.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Thank you, everyone. Okay, on to item 7, the LSC SB performance update. Rick, you taking us through this?
Yes, Chair. I'll take the ball through the. Everyone's had the report circulated to them. This is in relation to Q4 performance data, and just a reminder to the board that there is an interactive portal that they've got access to, which include all the KPIs that we currently have, and we're adding to that all the time. Because of the now quite complex data set, for brevity, the report will be a position statement with some exception reporting where it's appropriate. If I was to summarise the report, I'd say, accepting, of course, the conversation we've earlier had in relation to Hmrc, it's broadly a stable picture and overall nothing exceptional to report. Hmrc accepted, of course. Going through each of the areas, in relation to crime, nothing exceptional. Overall crime still rising, but the increase is stabilising. The burglary rate is stabilised, and violence with injury is showing a slow but steady rise. Vehicle offences had been rising, but the rate is actually now stabilising also. In relation to reducing offending and reoffending, again, nothing exceptional. The two core KPIs, which relate to the rate of first time entrance, 10 to 17, into the criminal justice system, and the rate of reoffending by young people, is still showing very good figures, but past excellent reduction rates are starting to plateau. That's been occurring for the last couple of reports. There is a new indicator that's now on the portal, which measures the percentage of young people at the time of youth justice disposal that are actively engaged in education, training or employment. As I say, that's a new item on the portal, and the current data for September 2019 is very similar to last year, but it just gives an extra indicator. Moving on to the next one, repeat victimisation and vulnerable victims. Nothing exceptional. We've had comments in relation to the repeat Hmrc referrals, and of course we will receive a report from the Hmrc manager at the next meeting. In relation to antisocial behaviour, again, nothing exceptional to report. There is, following comments previously, there is an additional data set now on the portal in relation to Sentinel data, which previously wasn't on there. So we now have the police data broken down by pen code, the personal, environmental and nuisance codes, but also in addition to that, the Sentinel data, which is the case managed data, and that is broken back down by district. The final item, preventing terrorism and radicalisation. Again, nothing exceptional to report. There's 2 additional indicators that have been added. Still, I would say that the reporting of hate incidents is at a very low level, but all indicators are stable. And that is a pen picture of the report that you've had, Chair.
Sorry, Ted, are you indicating question?
Please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Rick, may I ask a question regarding point number 6, which states violence with injury rates show a slow but steady increase. Do we have any further data to explain what type of violence with injury is happening? Are we seeing a trend with a particular type of weapon, i.e., for example, a knife? And is this something that the police are concerned about?
Yeah, I don't have the actual breakdown of that particular statistic to hand right now, but obviously I can look into that and report back.
If you would, please, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ted. Any other questions from anyone else on the phones? Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Rick. Okay, on to item 8, COVID-19 crime and ASB, pages 25 to 30 in the reports. Adam from the police, is he taking us through this?
Adam should be. He was here earlier.
Is he still online or?
I can see him online, but his mic seems to be turned off.
Can you switch it back on or not from your end?
Adam, are you there? Should we try and come back to this item?
Yeah, we'll come back to 8. If we go on to item 9 then, Police and Crime Commission and Strategic Partnership Board Update, pages 31 to 34. I've got Paul was going to take us through that, but I don't think he's on the line either. So
no, I think Gurjit's taking us through this one now.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Paul has sent his apologies through, so I shall take you through the report. Okay. I don't propose to go line by line because I appreciate there was a chairs meeting, a Community Safety Partnership chairs meeting on the 23rd of June. So I'll just pick out some of the highlights. The data and dashboard. The Community Safety Partnerships have now all received the demonstration on the dashboard, and performance team are looking at an impact analysis of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think lots of new information and exciting interactive dashboards will be coming through to you, so that's all positive. The office, whilst not physically in the office, is still continuing business as usual with all the boards and partnerships. So we're still continuing to work with all our partners across LLR. We are, oh, sorry, I've just lost my paper. The office is looking at a digital footprint to enable us to liaise better with some of our communities, and as part of that, the PCC has started a weekly blog, and we're looking at a virtual What Matters to You. We've also undertaken a couple of youth forums with the city and county youth commissions, which have gone really well, and we've been blown away actually by some of the questions that these young people have been asking the PCC and the deputy. In terms of the nighttime economy, I know that CSPs and at the localities, districts and boroughs, you're really working hard in preparation for 4th of July, and the office is supporting in that. Moving on to the funding at paragraph 12, some really positive news here. The OPCC has just been awarded £445,000 to support victims of domestic abuse. So we'll be working with our partners in setting up that plan and how we take that forward imminently. So that's really fantastic news. Violence Reduction Network, again, been really busy, and I'm aware that Grace was at the partnership chairs meeting. So we've received the funding, the 880k. We were actually commended for our application, our strategic needs assessment and our response strategy, so that's great. We've just recruited a new officer, some of you might know, Dr. Stevie Jade Hardy, so she'll be looking at our data and intelligence and producing all our monitoring reports, which again you'll all have access to and will be broken down by district and borough, so that's all really positive. In terms of the dashboard. And then at paragraph 18, just looking at some of the things that we're funding this year, the hospital-based violence intervention project is continuing. Whilst they had to come out of the hospital due to COVID, we're looking at a scaled back service going back into A&E next week with one officer. However, we are looking at other forms of referral. So, for example, we're linking in with the Leicestershire County Council's impact team to look at how we can support some of that detached youth work and get referrals through that. So we are looking at other referral pathways. We're funding Unlocking Potential, who are within Leicestershire Cares. Again, this is employability for 18 to 25-year-olds. We know on the back of COVID that unemployment, particularly amongst young people, is going to go through the roof. We know that our young people, our vulnerable young people, will probably be pushed further to the back of the queue when it comes to accessing job opportunities. So I think in terms of projects like that, they're going to be all the more important. We're continuing to deliver ACE training, and we're looking at delivering our violence intervention project to secondary schools in October now. That was scheduled for June, but again, due to COVID and the pressures that schools are under, we're now looking at October, and we're looking at an online type of training. So lots going on in terms of the people zones. That is an area of work that has been kind of scaled back because of COVID, but the OPCC are continuing to look at that. And then finally, the office is committing to building a resilience and capacity building leadership programme for community figures across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And the only other thing that I'd like to say that isn't in the paper, just on Monday, the Home Office advised us that we've been awarded £75,000 for small community voluntary sector organisations to bid into to support victims, to support vulnerable people during COVID. So these are young people who are at risk of or involved in serious violence crime. or on the verge of. We really need applications to come in. I know officers have received this information. Initially, we thought it was for organisations with an annual turnover of less than 100k. We've now been advised that that's 100k over 3 years. So it does broaden the scope of organisations that can apply into that. So just a request really, have a think if you know of any organisations in your locality and put them in touch with the VRN. Thank you, Chair, unless there's any questions.
Thanks, Gertrude. Just one point from me before I go to questions about what you're doing with the young people. Is that on page 32 under 8, the engagement, saying that the PCC has been talking to young people? Is that the young councils in both county and city? And you mentioned that some good questions coming from them. Do you know what sort of questions were coming from them or things they were raising? Is it along the same lines that we assume that were happening with the young people, or was it totally?
Yeah, it was along the same sort of lines, and bearing in mind, I mean, the ones that we conducted were very much set up by the Violence Reduction Network, so they were related to kind of knife carrying, things like that. But there were some really interesting questions about why people carry weapons and why they get involved in gang culture. And from that, they want to have some further conversations about our Mentors in Violence Prevention project that's going into schools, which is really brilliant because they want that in their schools. So, but some really, really intelligent questions and, yeah, really challenging questions.
That's really, so I presume that's going to carry on, because for me, obviously, that's really important that we get the voice of the young people that are actually involved and on the streets with this sort of knife crime and stuff like that. So that's really encouraging. Thanks for that, Gertrude. Ted, you've got a question?
Please, thank you. May I ask to expand on what Deborah's said, with the What Matters to You discussions, and also it mentions that the What Matters to You took place with faith leaders. Could you provide a report in the next meeting of what actually were the key themes that were coming up, so we know what people in the community, especially community leaders and young people, are actually saying, please?
Yep, that's no problem. I'll take that back, Chair.
Thank you. And the final question is the point 12 about the DSVA MOJ funding. So the 76 million is the total figure in England that's able to be bidded for, or England and Wales?
Yes, so we did bid in for that, and we've been awarded 445,000. We were just advised of that this week.
Yeah. It says a number of bids have been received and now sent to the Ministry of Justice for approval. So was this the one that was successful, but there were other bids that were put in that sadly didn't receive funding?
No, we put in, so the proposals came in from partners, so partners who deliver domestic abuse support and work. So it'll be Leicestershire Women's Aid, Living Without Abuse, for example. And then we collated them and sent in a proposal as one partnership proposal.
Oh, I see. So this £76 million funding is specifically for domestic abuse across the country?
Yeah, and it's specifically around supporting victims who have been victims through COVID.
Right, okay. Oh, thank you for the clarification, and thank you. We'll look forward to that report in the next meeting. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone else on the phones? Okay, thank you for that.
Chair,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, it's Superintendent Adam Swanetsky. My apologies for missing my slot. I'm the duty firearms commander for the force, and I had to take a phone call, but I am ready to brief the
okay, we'll come back to you. Okay, so just on this, the board's asked to note the contents of the report, so thank you for that, everyone. Okay, we'll go back to item 8, which is pages 25 to 30, the COVID-19 crime and ASB. Adam?
So, thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody, for your forbearance. My apologies for not being on the line at the suitable moment. My name's Adam Swanetsky. I am now the newly appointed superintendent for the counties within the restructure of the Leicestershire Police. So, effectively, one of Adam Street's deputies. Steve Potter leads for the city. But I've been asked to pull this paper together for you today, and also to take through an update as to what Leicestershire Police has been doing during the latest COVID-19 pandemic. I'm also the designated Silver Commander for our operational policing response, with partners to us coming out of the restrictions and our planning assumptions for the easing of restrictions around licensing and the nighttime economy. So as you can imagine, it's quite a busy time for us at the moment in force, ahead of the 4th of July and understanding legislation that's been laid for Monday next week. If I may start just by way of background, obviously when the pandemic was declared and some of the legislation that was brought in, we as a force had to respond quite quickly and dynamically, both in support of our partners from public health, but also in our role and function that government had decided was for the role of policing, in order to enforce the legislation that has been put in place. The approach to that has very much been what we've called the 4Es approach, and this has been a national strategy endorsed by the Home Office and through policing, which has been to engage, explain with the public, and then to encourage them to abide by the restrictions. And only as a matter of last recourse would we seek to enforce the legislation through the issuing of any COVID notifications or any other policing opportunities that we have going forward. It's worth a note that we moved quite early on during this collectively across the county to a position whereby Leicestershire Police's Deputy Chief Constable, Mr Nixon, took over as chair of the Strategic Coordination Group, and Chief Superintendent Ball, who is our head of specialist operations here at Leicestershire Police, due to his specialist skills and background, assumed the chair of the Tactical Coordination Group that pretty much has been sitting on a daily basis in order to oversee and coordinate the operational response across the county thus far. And I have been asked by those two individuals to pass on their sincere thanks for everyone's collective effort that they've put into delivering what has been the policing response under Operation Taller within Leicestershire Police. I think it's really worthy of note to colleagues on the phone that we moved to our new operating model within the police service, which we'd foreshadowed to a number of you on the call for a number of months in our restructuring. So we moved to this new restructuring where we'll be able to provide you a much more localised policing service, a much more accountable policing service. And within 48 hours, we had to move back to a 4th level model in order to deal with some of the contingencies and the demands that COVID-19 was now asking of us as a police service. So we had some core priorities which start on 26, which was to maintain a policing response to our incoming call demand. And this was certainly something that we know with our colleagues within EMAS and the fire service. This was a key priority, was to make sure that we had business as usual running as best as possible. There was significant consideration around what we were having to consider as being priority incidents, what we were putting our resources to, and also having to maintain that need to investigate pre-COVID-19 criminal matters and any matters that came about during the COVID period. We've included within this paper some statistics for between the 8th of March and the 24th of May, just to give you some comparative data between what happened last year in terms of policing terms across our county and then what has happened during the COVID period. And you'll see within that there are some areas of crime that we've seen significant reductions in, and they usually align themselves to where we've got more people staying at home, thankfully, but also where we've got rises in crime. It's because we're starting to detect some significant changes, and throughout that period we have also, just to be clear, business as usual has continued. We have had to deal with murder during the time that we've been in a state of lockdown. We have had to respond to some quite serious significant incidents that have put the public at risk, but we've tried to keep the wheel on as best as we could. The nighttime economy obviously fell away quite sharply with the closure of public places, licensed premises and restaurants. That gave us an opportunity to really reinvest our resource into the other policing demand that sort of was a consequence. So we have seen increase in domestic violence. We have had some concerns around safeguarding matters, and we've been able to put our policing resource and refocus it into those areas in order to make sure that we maintain a suitable proportionate policing response across that. In addition to that, from a resourcing perspective, I'd just like to highlight, as the lead for the Special Constables within Force, the fact that our Special Constables under a separate operation, Op Formidable, they delivered over 10,000 additional policing hours during the lockdown period. This was a significant effort on their part, and in effect what this enabled us to do was, in policing we have 4 grades of operational response. Grade 1 is our immediate life at risk emergency blue light response, through to grade 2. Grade 3 and 4 was where we were starting to get the reporting of COVID breaches and restrictions. And our special constables, who aren't paid, who are volunteers from the communities that we have the privilege to represent, they gave their own time and came in and pretty much took away about 25% of that demand from the force, so that we could maintain ourselves being more focused on the real threat to life and harm. But I'd also highlight the fact that some of those special constables arrested burglars whilst crime was in action. They seized unlicensed vehicles off the roads, and they've also arrested somebody suspected of rape within very short hours of an incident occurring. You know, they've been pretty exemplary, and I think it's a great testament to our communities that we represent that those individuals stepped forward and came forward to do that on our behalf. We have had some challenges in terms of seeing the criminal justice system through. As I'm sure you're all aware, there was suspension of the courts. We've had to move to a position where much of our magistrate work has been done virtually. That's had quite a demand on how we've dealt with people who've had contact with policing and have warranted escalation into the criminal justice system. And there's a lot of learning in that for us, and more broadly for the criminal justice system going forward, as to how we embrace technology, how we might want to move some of our processes on a little bit in the modern world in order to recognise how important technology has enabled us to keep our operational policing stance going forward. So I just mentioned that because it definitely has been quite a broad team effort to maintain law and order within Leicestershire going forward. From a new business and public expectation perspective, it's been really interesting in terms of our demand. We have probably seen demand on a regular basis throughout Leicestershire Police that is more aligned to the demand that we get on New Year's Eve. So our police officers have been running quite hot and for quite long sustainable hours, and I would suggest that's not just necessarily a demand that policing alone has seen. I do recognise the fact that that's also been a demand that some of our authorities, local authorities, have seen, and certainly colleagues in EMAS and the wider NHS. But I think it's worth recognising the fact that within that we've had quite a focused partnership approach to try and ensure that we've got the most appropriate agency dealing with the call for service that has come in. And certainly policing through our 101 system was started to see to be the default option for the reporting. I'm really pleased to say that through the partnership work that we've done with some of our local authorities, we've been able to move that into more of a collective partnership space, which has been really positive. We've undertaken a bit of service, satisfaction surveying, and 80% of those who were surveyed felt they were still getting a good or an excellent service from us as a police service in responding to that crime. In terms of fixed penalty notices, we are sat mid-table. We feel that we've been as proportionate and as engaging and explaining and encouraging as we could have been, but we have issued around 400 fixed penalty notices. And I would stress that within that, those 400 fixed penalty notices, there are quite a number where we've had the same individuals who are repeatedly breaching the COVID regulations, and therefore that doesn't mean that 400 people have been fined. There's a lesser number of individuals that have actually been have received fixed penalty notices. It's just a matter of how the legislation has worked in effect in the county. We've had quite an increase in demand around more broader calls for service. Certainly mental health has played its part, not least in terms of members of the public who are presenting with mental health issues that has resulted in a call for policing service, and therefore really We've been really well supported by our mental health team nurses and the triage team, but also in terms of a call in demand of other policing incidents that may have an underlying cause to mental health. And it does at the moment remain much higher than average. There is, some anecdotal evidence, obviously, to suggest that people staying at home and being cooped up doesn't help. But certainly, when we are starting to now really analyse what our demands look like, it started to shine a light to us in how we need to continue to foster the effective partnership work we have with some of our partners in the medical space and most prevalently in the mental health space. I was asked to just give a bit of an overview as to what our staffing has looked like. Like any organisation, we have had to respond to the clear guidance that's been given from Public Health England. Police officers aren't superheroes, well, I think they are, but they are not immune to the disease. We have had over 21 members of staff now who have tested positive for the disease. We've also had individual officers who have had family members who they live with who have also tested positively. And so our resourcing demand, much like I would suggest other blue light services, has really had to flex and change at speed in order to accommodate where those gaps are. We've been enabled by technology. I always describe policing as being a contact sport, but actually we've been able to use officers who are shielding or have had to quarantine themselves for 2 weeks to actually use them to undertake inquiries, desk-based inquiries, utilising Skype and utilising the IT investment that we put in place, which the paper talks about later in terms of remote working. Certainly for us as a police service, this period has challenged us to adapt to new ways of working. It's forced us to, at speed, identify different methods by which we can continue to keep the public safe. And it's just highlighted to us quite clearly the fact that we as an organisation have got a workforce that have really responded to the pressures and demands that have been put our way, and equally we ourselves have got new methods and new ways of working as a result of COVID that we probably wouldn't have envisaged having in play now had it not been for the pandemic that we have. I've kind of touched on page 29, managing absence and the remote working, and I suppose it's worth just noting now a point around what next. So we have a recovery cell that ACC Smith is leading on in terms of what we as a police service will be doing to take best practice into business as usual as we come out of this period of restriction. That is feeding into a broader recovery group that I know Paul Heinsohn from the OPCC's office sits on, where we're talking about how we across the county can work in more consolidated partnership approach to coming out of COVID. Because I think new partnerships have actually been formed through this. A lot of good operationally has come through this, not just the sadness of obviously all those deaths that we have experienced across our county. So there is some good opportunities that have come forward, and we certainly, from a police service, are really keen to see that those new opportunities are seized upon and properly understood through our partnership work. And then finally, the final point from me is Operation Integrate. I hope will become an operation that will become well known across all local authorities. Each NPA now has an operational Integrate plan that has been agreed through the local community safety partnership. How these plans need to adapt in order to accommodate the easing of restrictions ahead of the 4th of July are very much in a state of flux because the legislation and the guidance is changing quite dramatically. And we very much are in a space where we as a police service want to facilitate the restarting of the economy. We are very keen to support our local authorities, to encourage people to come back out, to support the local communities and the local community and the local economy. But as I would hope you would expect, as a police service, we also want to ensure that that is done as safely as possible, that we are ensuring that it is being done as proportionately as possible to keep people safe, to maintain a reduction in crime and to avoid serious violent disorder or any crime. And therefore, we are working very, very closely We are meeting 3 times a week with our partners at the moment in order to plan through what that looks like, both at a local level and at a force level. And as I said, I chair that as an operation going forward. We are trying to advocate the fact that we as a police service don't want to be seen as the fun sponges within this debate, but we are trying to make sure that we do this as safely as possible. You have seen what has happened in Reading recently. You'll have seen what has happened in the last couple of days within London. There are other causes for that, but we still live within a county that is wanting to allow people to protest. We are wanting to allow that which is their right. We are wanting to enable people to safely come out and support their economy. And therefore, we are suitably trying to put a policing operation in place in support of partners to make that happen as part of our recovery going forward. So the paper is submitted for endorsement by the group, and I'm more than happy to take any questions or any observations and to answer any questions you may have, Chair.
Thanks, Adam. I did really enjoy reading the report. Really useful information there. I suppose I speak for the whole board. I hope I do anyway, to pass on our thanks to the police and all the specials that have worked so hard over this pandemic. And I think we've been kept really well informed. I've certainly been kept informed through the neighbourhood link emails that I'm signed up to, and I recommend that everyone signs up to that because it's really helpful information about what's happening in your local area. Really pleased to see you're taking, I think we're all looking at to our own organisations to see what lessons have been learned and how we can move forward in a better way and come out of this in a much better place. So really be keen to come back to the board at some point with the lessons learned and the way forward for the police, how they're going to operate. And I think we're all aware that we've still got a lot of challenges ahead of us as we come out of this, the nighttime economy, all the schools going back, everyone coming back out of their houses. I think we're going to have a lot more challenges coming up ahead of in the year as long as we keep away from a second wave. So I think I've got Ted showing at the moment for a question. So Ted.
Thank you. Superintendent, if I could second the Chair's proposal that we give you a vote of thanks. I'm remarkably impressed, and I take to social media regularly to praise Leicestershire Police. May I ask you a question, please, though, Superintendent? Could you clarify in the figures when somebody calls 101 to report drug dealing in their community, do these show up in ASB? Because looking at the increase in ASB, which is 72%, I'm interested to know what type of ASB that is. And the second question, Superintendent, is could you just clarify for a layman as myself what assault on EW means? Because there's a 104.4% increase. Thank you.
Of course, Ted, thank you very much for your support and for your thanks. It is greatly appreciated on behalf of all my officers and staff. If I may take your questions in reverse. So assault EW is assault emergency worker, and there has been through the COVID period a significant increase in assault on emergency worker. And this is just not police officers, this is EMAS staff, and this is any reports of assaults on fire officers as well that has been reported. Now, just to clear that through, if you spit at somebody or bite somebody, that is an assault. And as you can imagine, when coming into close contact with members of the public in the last 3 months, it's been used as a bit of a tactic to keep our brave police officers away from members of the public, to suggest to us that they've got coronavirus, and then to start actively spitting at our officers when they're trying to deal with them, or potentially things like responding to a 101 call of report of drug dealing within the community. And when we've turned up to that, I've had daily reports of officers being spat at and people saying that they've got coronavirus, for which they've then been arrested for, assault emergency worker. And that, unfortunately, I suppose, is one of the statistics that is likely to start to maintain a bit of profile both in national and regional press as we start to understand what the impact of this has been going forward. But as I said, that has not dissuaded us from dealing with those individuals robustly, and as a superintendent, I regularly write statements to magistrates in support of prosecution. And I'm really pleased to say that we have been very positively supported by the magistrates in that regard, even to the point that Leicestershire, I believe, it's yet to be properly confirmed, but we still currently believe Leicestershire may have had the first magistrate that felt that their sentencing powers weren't suitable enough and therefore referred sentencing to Crown Court for somebody who attempted to assault 4 of my officers on Foss Park on a day out when they shouldn't have been. So that's what EW means, and hopefully that's a bit of context as to what those figures may be representing. Your question on 101 is a matter of grading. So when you ring 101 to Leicestershire Police, you're making a report, and that report may result in an intelligence log being generated, or it may result in what information is taken by the call handler, how they grade it. So when you're given an example of drug dealing in the local community, we will do one of 2 things first. First, we have to think, is there an immediate threat or risk to the public that warrants us deploying an operational police officer now to go and deal with that incident or that issue in that report? And on the basis of that assessment, we will deploy officers. Equally, we may link that report with other reports that may then warrant the deployment of a police officer, or it may manifest itself in being a report into our intelligence capability to develop the intelligence further. But to summarise, the increase in antisocial behaviour, I would suggest, is more likely to be that your next door neighbour is at home. They've been at home for a good number of days, and they've got to the point where they just want to play music and have a bit of so we've seen an increase in antisocial behaviour and a very stark increase in neighbour disputes. So that is some of the rationale reason behind that. Drug dealing being reported as a 101 will be dealt with and categorised as an intelligence report around a drug offence. If that then results in the police officer deploying and we found drug dealing in the community, that would then be dealt with as a drug offence. But I would suggest that somebody calling in as 101 in the first instance, that would probably be dealt with as a report of a drug issue, and then whether or not it gets categorised as a drug offence or as intelligence will be a matter for what the description of the report is and how it is operationally responded to there on in. But the ASB figures are more about neighbour disputes and people unfortunately being constrained to barracks and having to try and muck along with each other, and it has also accentuated existing disputes within communities and other areas that we have had more calls to service than we normally would have, and they would go down as ASB.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adam. Any other questions? Okay, we're asked to note the update and to note the implementation of Op Integra and the approach being taken by Leicestershire Police to begin to plan for and implement the recovery phase of the COVID-19 lockdown. And Adam, just please pass on the thanks to all your staff and your specials for all their hard work over the past few months for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to item 10 now, Children and Family Wellbeing Service, pages 39 to 42.
Yeah, I think we've got Ellie Lowe should be on the line.
Yes, I am.
Hello. Do you want to take us through your report?
I will, thank you, Chair. So the new Children and Family Wellbeing Service was launched back in April last year, and it brought together 4 existing services within the County Council. That included supporting Leicestershire families, which is our county response to the National Troubled Families Programme. So the new service comprises locality-based multidisciplinary teams, plus some infrastructure staff who we have based at County Hall, alongside some of our core youth offending teams. And I think it's fair to say the early months of last year were very much spent in bringing our practice together and developing our systems and processes across the new service, whilst obviously still delivering services to families. I'll move on to our response to COVID. So we feel our staff have responded extremely flexibly and have shown great creativity in their work during this very difficult period. Almost all of our staff have been home-based, and with family visits greatly reduced to only those that have been considered most essential. However, this is now gradually starting to increase again, but during the period we were undertaking doorstep visits and socially distanced visits as we needed to. Our 21 children and family wellbeing centres were closed to the public, But work is now underway to reopen these for essential services, so that's things like social care contact between parents and children and parental drug testing. And we'll continue to work with the County Council, Health and Safety and Property Services to get our buildings back up and running again. Our staff sickness, we've been very fortunate, it was extremely low during this period, and I think that's thanks to having staff enabled to work from home. At the start of the pandemic, we did have to stop all of our group work programmes. These were necessarily cancelled, but the work in the interim has been delivered quite differently. So this has included providing one-to-one telephone support to families and young people, sending out group work programmes as workbooks and activity packs, and providing additional telephone support. More recently, we've been able to get some of our groups, including the Triple P parenting programme, delivered via Skype video call. Also, at the start of the crisis, our service delivered 1,164 food parcels to families who were really struggling in those early days to access food. So we delivered those across social care and our own service. So from the start of the lockdown to the end of May, the Impact project has been paused, but it's now once again operational. And we're working closely with the police and district antisocial behaviour leads to respond to live intelligence of concerns. So it's mostly around groups of young people congregating in areas of their community. Our current offer from Impact includes street-based youth work, and also we've expanded our digital offer to young people. Some of our key successes during the last year was the achievement of 100% of the payment by results target set for the phase 2 of the National Troubled Families Programme. This means we were able to demonstrate sustained and significant progress for 2,770 families over the period, and included in this figure are 668 families who were supported into continuous employment. The programme has now been extended for a further year, and we have a new target set of 464 families. And despite the obvious challenges in this current year, we still remain confident that we'll be able to achieve this target. I've already mentioned we introduced a new evidence-based parenting programme this year called Triple P. It's one of a very small number of programmes recognised by the Early Intervention Foundation as being able to deliver good outcomes for families struggling around parenting and behaviour. So we've had over 35 practitioners who've received accredited training, and they're now able to deliver a range of approaches, including seminars and discussion groups and more traditional parenting programmes. And this is targeted for parents of disabled children, parents of primary school age children, and parents of teenagers. So we're in the process at the moment of transferring our delivery to mostly online, and Triple P has also provided us with entirely online courses for parents to follow, with telephone calls from practitioners to support them along the way. This greater use of digital delivery is something that we definitely want to continue. We're going to continue exploring it as a cost-effective additional means of supporting families. Our early feedback suggests that families and young people have actually, in some cases, found this a better method of service delivery because it's offered them greater flexibility. So it's certainly something that we're interested to take forward and reflect on and build on following this COVID period. Thank you, Chair. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Ellen. It's good to see how services have adapted in the pandemic to ensure that there's support out there for all the families that need it. Are there any questions from anyone for Ellie? No, nothing for you, Ellie. You must have done a very good report. Thanks a lot. Thank you. On to item 11, cybercrime, pages 43 to 46, and Detective Inspector Peter. Is he on the line?
I certainly am, yeah. It's Peter Flint, Detective Inspector of the Digital Hub. A little bit of a presentation which, given the format of the meeting, I'll talk through rather than anything else, which should hit most of the points in the report.
Yeah, I just got to load the presentation.
If it doesn't, please ask questions as I go on. Okay, so I look after the Digital Hub for Leicestershire Police that actually is made up by about 5 different units, one of which is the cybercrime unit, the smallest area I've got. We have a number of detectives, PCSO and Cyber Protect Officer, and if you've having a look at Neighbourhood Link, you might have seen the name of one of them on there passing advice across. But why is it such an issue, cybercrime? Well, it's tier 1 government risk. It's part of the Office of PCC's strategic police and crime plan. And, well, essentially, there's more crimes online than offline. And fraud has been increasing for a long time, and a lot of that is enabled by cyber computer crime. And on the slide, if you did look at it, it's not a matter of if you get affected, it's when. So everyone will be affected by this at some point. The cyber definition, I think this is probably not so important really, because people don't care what the definition is, but essentially it's computer on computer crime. I think the stats get very confused when it comes to looking at cyber dependent crime, so computer on computer crime, because it can lead to lots of other crime of fraud and blackmail, which has all been started by the technical offence, but then goes on and allows people to commit other crime. I mean, it ranges from what you might think is not so serious, gaming crime, where people who want to win at Call of Duty or first-person shoot-em-up games actually employ some software to deny their opponents access to the internet. And that's the same software that can be used to deny websites to work, like Ladbrokes betting or however. MPs' emails have been hacked in the past. WannaCry, I'm sure everyone from the NHS will remember how that affected us, particularly the NHS. Disgruntled employees. Now, we've had a few of these jobs, and that can be a mixture of them just actually causing criminal damage, if you like, by destroying computer servers of small businesses, or it could be that they actually steal the data and take that on to give them advantages in the next business. And we've got crimes we're investigating right now, both of those. Ransomware is something that affects everyone. If it affects you as an individual, you might end up clicking on a link which will install something which essentially puts a padlock on all your data, and you can't get access to it unless you pay some bitcoins or some money. It might actually be that particular ransomware has been cracked before, so there's ways you can find out about that, and we might be able to get the padlock off. Or it might be, if you are a large organisation or a university, and has happened in the past, you're prepared to pay large sums of money to get that data back, because your business or the educational service will fall over if you don't get access to that data, and we can't get access any other way. Not something we recommend, but we recognise that people do that. And of course, it can be defaced websites as well, and the websites can be defaced for a whole host of reasons, from the joke from the students to done for other reasons, such as putting some terrorist material out there, or the like. There's all sorts of reasons for defacing websites. So there's a whole gamut of cyber offences. One thing I'll continue to say through this is that the loss to cyber-dependent crime is actually, it looks quite minuscule, but it's how that data and that information is used going on what effect it has. As the 4 Ps, as we call them, used from the originally in the terrorism area, but it was adopted elsewhere as well. There's various things that we need to concentrate on nationally and as a force to address this. And one of the massive things we need to do constantly is protect. Crime prevention advice. So raising it with from individuals to organisations, raising awareness of the problem, and people can be affected, and they can take simple steps, giving them that simple advice, using more complex passwords, not reusing them, updating your devices, all those sorts of things. And that's what we need to do. And also the social engineering advice, or advising people not to fall foul of it, as a member of my family's have in the past, or ring me to say, is this real? So we've got to give that advice out, and a lot of works have been done on that in the past. I'll go on to a couple of things, but there's some some material that we've shared with various agencies regarding simple videos, a 4-minute video which we can show to our staff, and of course our staff are also the public, and they take it home to give them advice about what they shouldn't be doing. So prevent is another big area. Now, obviously, cybercrime can be instigated internationally, nationally and locally. Some of the local stuff that goes on could be down to our younger people, and also they can commit the offences going further afield. And if we can have early intervention to these young people, whether identified through incidents that happened at school, for example, and we're not talking about coming in to prosecute people, that's not what that's about. It's actually diverting them to different ways, actually putting them on something called immersive labs where they can play games. That sounds really trite, but actually practice some of their skills and turn them for good. Instead of being somebody, a black hat hacker, be a white hat hacker, somebody who works for the good. And you'll find that, I believe it might have been WannaCry, but a previous virus was actually detected by somebody who classed themselves, who used to work for evil and then work for good. So yeah, we need to identify, divert, and essentially, if we can get people at an early stage, at least we can turn some people away from using their skills for evil. Prepare, I mean, that's all about the national infrastructure, researching what's coming and then seeing how we can mitigate that, and there'll be a couple of things to talk about later on. Pursue, basically investigating. That can be a bit of an issue, as I've already alluded to, because it could be that it's somebody in a completely different country which is committing these offences, or it can be somebody locally, and we get both sides in our cybercrime unit. We might get the suspect lives on us, but they're committing offences elsewhere. We might get the suspect and victim on us, but it can happen anywhere. And of course, as I've alluded to, sometimes locking them up isn't the right thing to do. And if they're really clever, we have to catch them when they make a mistake, because there's lots of ways to, I think the right term is obfuscate your presence on the internet. So we look out for mistakes, which people inevitably make, and there's various things we can do to try and track down people who don't do it very well. Again, if you had access to the PowerPoint, you'd see a slide here, which is actually now a year old. I haven't been able to update it because
the PowerPoint is up. Which slide do you want me to? Do you want to take over this presentation?
The slide I was referring to now was number 5. If you had access to the PowerPoint,
yeah.
How we keep ahead of the game, and that is actually based on the report from the National Fraud Investigative Bureau and FIB from last year. It actually got released 3 days ago, the updated one. And they'll talk about the loss to cybercrime and fraud. And last year, the loss to cybercrime was, I believe it was 40 million. This year, you'd see the news was it was just 5 million. That sounds like good news, but it's not. It's just been moved. And in actual fact, some of the categories of how offences are committed, the actual big loss is from fraud. So nationally, I believe that's 2 billion. And I can give you some local figures, because what they've helpfully done is provide a dashboard, which I believe is publicly accessible, which can break down the different types of fraud and cybercrime to areas, and also break down by ages as well, and by sex. And some of this information is in the report, but actually is publicly accessible as well. So once I get the non-law enforcement version of this report, we can make sure that's shared with everyone, including this link. Basically, it's saying cybercrime losses have gone down. They haven't, they've just moved a category. But the actual numbers of reports have gone up, and I believe it's gone up something like 15 or 16% over the last reporting period, the last year. There are some of the things that they are doing nationally, launching the suspicious email reporting tool, which they've just done. So people can send it. We need to communicate that out better, but people can send, this was a suspicious email, send it to this location. And they also do things in the background which people aren't aware of, like trying to stop fraudsters using email addresses that look like Hmrc, for example, and trying to do something. They can't stop the ones that don't look like that, but they're trying to stopping some things at source as well. So we're going through that report at the minute, and so to make sure there's anything else we need to be cognizant of. As I've said, going into slide 6, we started off in 2016. We started early with our cybercrime unit, only small, but then very quickly the funding started to come from the centre to set these units up across the country. And we currently have 3 detectives who deal with investigations and some of the prevent element as well, and a detective sergeant which oversees them, and what I call digital media investigators. We have a cyber PCSO, we have the cyber protect officer, Sam Hancock, which hopefully you will have seen some things from her on the neighbourhood link. And the prevent role, we managed to get that, an extra detective, because we're going to be doing more work in that prevent arena, which I've already spoken about. The PCSO, Sam Hancock and TIFT, have put on more recently, just before COVID, some conferences that's aimed at the charity sectors to alert people of some of the issues that they face as small organisations, and giving some advice and then some pointers, and they were very, very successful. Excuse me. As a force on the investigation side and the protect side, we get sent stuff from Action Fraud, an arm of NFIB. We get sent things in from them. They also get called in directly as well. And we, as part of, to prove that we're doing our job, we need to show that we've investigated 100% of the cases that pass through to us, or provided advice on 100% of the cases. Some of those investigations can be quite short. Well, it's from overseas and we can't trace it any further, or actually it is a local job and we can progress it, or in actual fact it's national and we can pass the suspect details on. So we were quite pleased to hit those targets, and I think nationally we're quite proud of the cybercrime team and the digital hub as a whole, because we are seen as quite a forward, on the front foot as a department, and we have got some excellent investigators and expertise within house. What we're going to do, well, that prevent scheme I've spoken about, we need to identify people earlier, and that's maybe something we can do, work together with schools and other agencies to actually identify people. Like I say, it isn't about prosecution, it's about preventing things going on. So if we can identify people earlier, that's great. We've got to enable key staff across all our organisations to pass the relevant message on, maybe using some of the tools we've had before, the restricted intelligence videos that I spoke about, but also passing on the knowledge. And some of this is really simple stuff, as I said, and I don't think any of our organisations think because we've got an IT department we're safe. We're not. Australia have just had what they are classing as an attack from an outside state for a stance they've taken on coronavirus, and it was really sad to hear that the attacks that have taken place have actually exploited loads of loopholes in software which there are patches for. So people have actually suffered things which there is a remedy for, and don't think that's just Australia, that's going to be us as well. And even if we have all these things in place, social engineering is a bit of a problem, because even with all those things in place, if somebody gets on the phone and say they're from your broadband provider to somebody who's agile and working from home, so they're no longer on the organisation's infrastructure, they may well think that they're doing the right thing by using their laptop, which they use for work, to allow them access to fix their broadband problem. And you can imagine the data that goes from that. This is a cybercrime, but has massive impacts if it's commercial data, and also big impacts if it's other sensitive data. I'm not sure how I got to that, but we need to carry on to create a toolbox of scenarios so we can roll out to people, so you can do some of that testing. Cyber Essentials Plus is a great way to prepare your organisation, but it doesn't actually take away from business continuity plans and running scenarios to see that if something happened and our system was taken down, all our phone numbers can't be on the intranet because we can't access the intranet. Simple things. And also we need to assist with baseline assessments for small and medium enterprises, and there is some work going on at the minute where a tool has been developed to help small businesses actually see where some of their cyber attacks and potential flaws and holes in their system is, so reports can be provided and we can act early. So that will be rolled out soon. What do we need? Points of contact within our key stakeholders to make sure that any changes going forward can be supported. The continued support and encouragement about training, perhaps using some of that old stuff I spoke about, but also the new things, doing those same methods. It's no good telling kids once to not cross the road without looking twice, or not to get strangers' cars. You've got to do these things on a regular basis, and let's face it, as adults we need that too, because we can get very comfortable and fall foul of that very, very cleverly written phishing email. We need to review intelligence gaps. It's all part of reviewing the reports that have just come out and see how we can develop our understanding and target our approaches, because pursue investigation is great, but we want to stop it upstream if we can. And yeah, make sure that among all our organisations and to individuals out there that we're getting all this information and we're advertising, for want of a better word, selling the message of the small steps that people can take. Like I say, the Australian one that's just come through, I'll refer to that because it's very recent, but it's quite interesting that although it's state-sponsored, they're saying a lot of the attacks have just been copy and pasted from things that have already happened from the internet. It's nothing clever. And they've also, we're all vulnerable to the remote ways of working, and that has been a factor. People clicking on phishing emails, people have been directly targeted, and infected things have been put in Dropbox and then downloaded to systems. And a lot of this can be prevented by the advice, the more complex passwords, not reusing passwords, yeah, just being a little bit more aware. That pretty much comes to the end of my presentation. I may or may not have covered everything in the report, but is it appropriate to ask for any questions?
Thanks, Peter. Just a couple of things from me. You mentioned about the link to the cybercrime and the stats and what's happening. That would be really good if that can be shared, if you can pass it on to you and so we can share with everyone. That would be good. You sound like you've got a very small team doing a large amount of work, so I'm sure you're very busy. So I do appreciate you coming here and sharing that with us. If you've got any sort of information that we can share as well in all our locations and across the county, if you can send that through you and we can disseminate that across all the localities within the county through our own social media and things like that. So that would be good. If there's anything particular that you're aware of, you can filter through to us.
Did you mean a particular cyber protect advice or information? That's not a problem. Yeah, we can sort that.
Yeah, if there's any hot things going on, you know, that'd be good for us to know, and we can filter that out across the county. And just one more thing for me, if people are victims of fraud or they get, you know, suspicious phone calls or that, are they best to report to Action Fraud or to report through 101?
That's a really good question. Action Fraud, we say if it's, and again, this doesn't make much sense to some people, 101 is always a good place to start. Action Fraud is meant to take the non-live cyber attacks. It's happened. There's nothing we can do right now to get there, and they collect and then they disseminate. And what we do say is that vulnerable people, people who need that advice, we ask our control room to actually refer those in directly. Don't tell people to ring Action Fraud because we need to get out to them, whether that's visit or phone calls. So it's people can do, my personal advice is people do what's comfortable with them. 101 is a good start because we will advise you going on the internet if they've got access or are happy to access the Action Fraud website. That's another way to do it. So there are two methods. If something has happened and someone is generally upset and they need advice straight away, 101 is the place to start.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Is there any other questions from anyone else? Okay, there are some recommendations on page 45. There's 4 recommendations for the board on there. To support and encourage the adoption of the cybercrime as a strategic priority across all local authority span. B, support the setup, advertisement and successful utilisation of cybercrime prevent referral process across Leicestershire. C, ensure staff within all stakeholders organisations receive cybercrime prevention advice in order to keep themselves safe online. And D, encourage membership of the Cybercrime Strategic Oversight Group to help ensure effective information sharing and collaboration working of all parties involved. So if anyone's not happy to support them, just let me know. If not, we're happy to support all those recommendations.
That's excellent. Well, thank you for, hopefully people didn't fall asleep through that. I'm very passionate about all of that. So,
we can tell that. No, it's really helpful for us to be aware of what's going on. That's really good. Thank you for coming, Peter.
No, I shall leave you to it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On to item 12, domestic abuse recommissioning. Joshua, are you taking us through this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yeah, this report is to provide yourselves with an update on the progress and the plans in relation to our recommissioning of domestic and sexual violence and abuse services for Leicestershire, but the services across City, County and Rutland. The background is that the commissioning of these services transferred from Children and Family Services to Public Health in the county in September of last year. The current contract provided by UAVA was due to end on the 31st of March 2021, pre the COVID pandemic. The additional commissioning partners alongside County, Leicester City Council, Rutland County Council and the PCC's office. So the work we've done to date, we've got a project group, the LLR Domestic Abuse Redesign and Recommissioning Group, that's overseen by the PCC's office. We meet on a regular basis and we're responsible for the project plan and any of the project work streams, and that group reports to the vulnerability exec. The work we've done to date, we had the initial stakeholder consultation sessions towards the end of 2018 to try and understand the strengths and challenges of the current provision, and feedback from those sessions then helped us to inform our future proposal. That proposal then went out to public consultation towards the end of last year. For county specifically, we had 28 responses, and there was general consensus on the approaches that we put forward in the draft proposal. A specific comment did include suggestions around extending the opening hours, so for example including Sundays, bank holidays, and also to consider a 24/7 service. Other feedback was around accessibility for any accommodation for victims, particularly around the refuge service. Other comments included the need for longer term support and the need for more specialist counselling support. And so where possible, we've pulled together that feedback and tried to incorporate changes where we can. But as you can all appreciate, we have to balance it against the financial constraints. So the elements of this service provision that we're planning to commission include a helpline and engagement service, a locality domestic abuse support service, a sexual violence support service. An element will include safe accommodation and refuge service and a perpetrator programme. We were progressing at pace, and then due to the pandemic, the work slowed down considerably, and also because we've all had subsequent competing priorities. So as a result, all partners sought formal approval to postpone procurement for a period of 12 months and extend the current contract with UAVA for 12 months. So the new service contract start date will now be the 1st of April 2022, and we're in the process of finalising the contract extension with UAVA at the moment. As things are easing off around COVID, the recommissioning work is now beginning to pick up pace, and we're in the process of developing a new project timeline in order to have the new service operational from 2022. In terms of our current potential challenges, we need to consider the speed at which commissioning partners and the provider market are able to recover from the pandemic and able to return to business as usual. Another challenge is the existing financial envelope, as this isn't sufficient to address all of the suggestions from the feedback from consultations. So, for example, having a 24/7 helpline, having an open-ended counselling support service, having more accommodation in more locations. The other challenge is having a seamless pathway for residents using the service, irrespective of the local authority in which they reside, but also trying to balance this with the need for each commissioning partner to have assurances of the effectiveness of their service in meeting the needs of the population that they serve. So that's sort of a whistle-stop tour of the work we've done today, the next steps for us, and the request is for the board to take note of the work being undertaken to recommission the domestic and sexual violence and abuse services for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Joshua. Just one from me. The accommodation that we've got, is that for males and females and people with children and without children? Does that cover across the board?
We're planning to, so in the service spec we have specified whether to expand to include accommodation for males, how the provider wishes to,
and also with children.
That. And with children. So children, we can currently do that with the existing provision, but yeah, that will be part of the spec.
Okay, thanks, Joshua. Any other questions for Joshua? No? Okay, thanks very much for coming, Joshua. Thank you for the report. On to item 13, other business. I don't know if Mr. Old's back online yet, is he?
I am, yes.
Is there anything you want to say?
Just to thank you and Walters in particular, who's been the officer that I've most worked with, and Rick Basra, who's kept me very well informed over the last 2 years, and to wish good luck to everybody else.
Thank you, Mr. Old. And just the date of the next meeting scheduled to take place on the 25th of September at 10 o'clock, and I presume near the time Ewan will know whether that's virtually or in person.
Yeah, I'll be in touch.
Okay, lovely. Thanks. Thank you everyone for tuning in and dialing in, and take care, and hopefully we'll meet again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.